Hey, this is Helen Dawson, and you're listening to the Innovation Crowd podcast. Businesses are looking to reinvent themselves, be more digital, more sustainable, and thrive in a volatile world. Yet most corporate innovation programs don't deliver. In fact, many don't even survive after their second birthday. On this show, I sit down with the experts to discuss the strategies that work, so you don't have to learn the hard way. So come and join me in the Innovation Crowd. Hello and welcome back to our discussions about innovation. Today I'm delighted to have Tim Bennett joining from Shell's TapUp business. So hopefully we're going to have a really good chat about how it's different running an established business unit versus being in a corporate startup. So Tim, why don't you introduce yourself?
Yeah, hi Helen. Thanks for inviting me on today. So my name's Tim Bennett. I am the general manager for Shell TapUp UK, and we've been running that business as a corporate startup, owned and funded by Shell, and we launched that business in April 2020. So about 2.5 years now.
And tell us what TapUp does.
Okay, so TapUp is a mobile fueling business, and what that means is we collect fuel and we take it to our customer's location, and we fill our customers' vehicles up directly from one of our delivery vehicles. And the intention of the business is to save our customers significant time that they would normally be spending with their drivers sat in forecourts or travelling to forecourts, and then the actual filling operation. But one of the key things that we're trying to support customers with is the energy transition. So clearly through us bringing the fuel to the customer's site, we're reducing the amount of miles that the customer is having to drive, which reduces emissions. And also through the TapUp service, customers can access what we call cleaner alternative fuels, such as HVO, which stands for hydrogenated vegetable oil, and Shell GTL. And both these fuels have an environmental benefit compared to diesel. And they are drop-in fuels, so you can use them in a diesel engine without any modification. So we're trying to support the customers in getting some hard-earned time back through taking care of their fueling, which is clearly a non-value add but essential task. So we can take care of that, and then also helping them with their energy transition through reducing the number of miles that they're doing, but also giving them access to alternative fuels that they can't collect at the forecourt.
Excellent. And I remember some of this from my old days at Shell. So talk me through what you think the kind of biggest differences are between working in a corporate startup like Shell TapUp versus kind of previous operational P&L roles that you've had.
So I think the one of the key sort of differences is the freedom, but also with freedom comes responsibility. So when you're in a sort of...
You sound like Spider-Man.
Yeah. Well, as you know, I've actually got my Spider-Man mug here, who is clearly my role model. So yeah, when you're working in a larger, more established business, the challenges are no different. You know, the things you're trying to achieve are quite similar. However, the feeling of, what should we say, support or ownership of all the problems and all the challenges is quite different. So in a larger organisation, you have more people to sort of seek guidance from, more people to support with things, more people to just get stuff done. Whereas clearly in a startup, everything falls on a smaller number of people. You know, for instance, with, as you will remember from your time at Shell, TapUp in the UK was launched by me, and I recruited one MSC, we call them Mobile Service Champion, and so there was two people launching that business, sourcing all the supply chain, getting all the infrastructure in place, searching out the customers, getting the contracts in place, as well as delivering the service. So the level of responsibility that you have to get stuff done, I think, is a lot greater in a startup environment than in a well-established business where you've got lots of people, larger teams, and more people to turn to, really. So I think that's one of the biggest challenges, but equally that's where a lot of the excitement comes from. So I was particularly looking for something that was less corporate, more startup, because I kind of thrive on that level of involvement. So it certainly ticked the box for me.
And what's the kind of day in the life for you? A sort of typical day?
So a typical day is typically varied, and the role truly is cross-functional. So I'm an operator by background, so my previous roles have all been leading large operational teams, whether that's in aviation or manufacturing, but they've always been operationally based, whereas the role now truly is cross-functional. So clearly there is an operation, but there's also commercial elements, there's financial elements, there's business development elements. So my day typically involves touch points with each of those corporate functions, each of those corporate requirements. I do try to run the business like an operation, so we have a regular drumbeat of touching base with the key members of the team, reviewing what's happened in the last 48 hours, what's happening in the next 48 hours. But the things that come up in those sessions and as a result of those sessions is truly varied. You know, could be one day dealing with recruiting new drivers or new MSCs, whereas the next day we could be on the verge of closing, you know, multi-million-pound contracts. So it really is diverse, and the ability to operate in the kind of minutiae in 1 minute to being much more strategic in the next minute it is really critical. And if you can't do that, then you will struggle with these types of roles.
And how did it feel when you got your first customer?
That's a good question. Yeah, I mean, it felt great. It was on the back of probably 6 months of scoping work, and by that I mean it was 6 months sort of seeking out regulatory support from it, both internally and externally within Shell. So there was a lot of stakeholder management and putting things in place before you can actually go out and then start talking to some customers. So I'd been operating within the business for probably 6 months, but operationally we'd probably only been a few weeks in. So it actually came round quite quickly, and yeah, it was great. It was very customer service driven. So it was, how do we give the customer exactly what they want? How do we make sure that we're also achieving what we want to achieve from a commercial perspective? So it was a really great experience, and Joseph, who was the first mobile service champion, the two of us turned up to site on the first day, delivered to the customer. We gave everyone cupcakes, I think, or donuts, and yeah, it was really great. It was a nice fanfare event.
Yeah, and I think one of the things that I often talk to people about is that things take time, right? And how do you feel about that kind of timeline? Do you feel there's a kind of corporate pressure, or do you feel you've got kind of the mandate to build the business and you've got the space to do that?
Yeah, so I think, as I mentioned earlier, sort of my operations background makes me quite impatient anyway. So you know, I like to work at a pace, and I like to push things through as, you know, as quickly as can be done. So I think that that sort of time pressure comes from within me as opposed to from within the business. However, there is always a conflict between growth and profitability, for example, and that brings different pressures. So it's easy to grow, it's difficult to grow profitably, and sometimes there's a challenge between those two requirements. Yet when you look at your business plan, it clearly wants both. So I think the pressures come from trying to balance that growth mindset with also a profitability mindset, and working out where in that you know, where you land in that field.
Yeah, and I guess being part of a corporate, you don't have the luxury that, say, Ocado had, or Amazon had, or Uber still has, around growing but not yet cashing a check.
Yeah, and I think it's so don't get me wrong. There is a acknowledgement from you know, the parent company, as we like to refer to them as. There is the support there to let us grow and let us find our feet, and support us along the way. However, there is, of course, the mindset that is already an established business, and a very profitable business. So anything that is done, there is an assumption that it will get to that point perhaps quicker than is realistic. But again, it's always good to have those challenging goals, and that expectation, I think, helps drive performance.
Yeah, and I think the research says that it takes something like 7 years to build something to the size that it would be a business unit in its own right,
Yeah.
which is a long time, and probably maybe 1.5 CEOs of a company to get there.
Yeah.
And I think that's a kind of misunderstood area for senior stakeholders in established companies, because that feels like a really long time.
Yeah, and I think you're right. It does feel like a long time, and yeah, I think typically the expectation is probably half of that. but I think as long as you're able to demonstrate, and the way to look at this is break the business down into units. So in my business, can we demonstrate a profitable transaction? And by transaction, we mean one vehicle fill up. If you can demonstrate a profitable transaction, that's great. Can you then demonstrate a profitable full vehicle load, one of our delivery vehicle loads? And then from then it's, can you demonstrate a profitable shift, a profitable day, a profitable week, profitable month, etc. And if you, as long as you're able to demonstrate in those different units that your business case makes sense, then you stand a better chance of keeping that stakeholder engagement. As soon as you start to fail to deliver at those levels, that's when questions will likely be asked. So we try to break it down into those component parts and look at how the business is performing on those at those different levels.
Totally makes sense. So one thing I wanted to ask you about is, where do you kind of recruit people from to join your team? Because that's probably one of the most debated conversations I have with people, is to sort of, where do they find the people to work in a corporate venture?
Yeah, and it is it's almost a niche area, because you are looking for people who have that corporate understanding, because clearly we still have a level of corporate responsibility and corporate involvement. So you do need people who understand that, get that, and can cope with it. But also you need that entrepreneurial flair and excitement from completing the deal, finding the deal, those kind of things. And so that's what you're looking for in terms of the type of person to join the business. In terms of where we find those people, we look in sort of all avenues really. So it's within your own network, it's through contacts with people you've worked with in the past, it's through some general recruitment. So there is a mix of people that we've got coming into the business. But also, recruitment is a challenge, because when you're growing, I feel like I'm in a constant cycle of recruitment at the moment, and that's hard, and it's tiring, and it's so important as well, because if you get the wrong person, then it can totally derail what you're trying to do. So it's even more critical in a growing smaller team than it is in a large team that you can afford to get a couple wrong. So recruitment is really key.
Yeah, and I think we often kind of debate that, kind of what are the skills that someone needs to have inside themselves versus what are the skills that can be taught.
Yeah.
So what's your view of what's that innate drive?
So I'm always of the belief that in skill versus will comes on top. And I think you can normally teach people or somebody can normally learn an industry or a product or a process, but having that the way they're built in terms of how they turn up to work, their attitude to work, all those kind of things, I don't think you can teach that, and I think that is an innate trait, and so I will always look for that over industry expertise or previous experience. That for me, it's definitely the makeup of the person as opposed to their actual experience of industry or role type in the past.
And that makes sense. And I think especially because it really is quite an operational business that you're running. As opposed to a lot of corporate ventures that seem to be digital, but actually you've got a real backbone of operations, equipment, hazards.
Yep.
In your space.
Yeah, and that's one of the challenges. So, and I can't quote the actual number, but in our business, every time we take on X number of new customers, I've got to increase my asset base and I've got to increase my people. Whereas perhaps a technology-led business, you don't have that because the capacity is much greater at the beginning and you just fill that capacity, whereas that's where all the cost is in this business. So it's new trucks, it's new drivers, it's new operating centres, it's new tanks every time the customer base grows. So you've got to be very careful in how you do that and match that up with your pipeline. And I think one of the key learnings for launching new sort of countries and markets is we started with no customers. Ideally, you'd be starting with a full pipe of customers who from day one of you being operational are going to be using the service, and that's one of the big learnings we've had, and we do have ambitions to launch into other markets, and that's what we'll be working closely with our corporate partners to say, well, actually you need to demonstrate the demand before we put in the supply.
Yeah, I know it must be really hard to get those two things in sync. So kind of changing tack a bit, why do you think kind of companies find it hard to innovate and build new business models, having sat in the middle of it for best part of 3 years now?
So why do I think they find it difficult? I think because it is difficult. So I don't think it's because everybody's doing something wrong. I think it's just it is difficult, it is challenging, and perhaps there's if you've never done it and experienced it, you can't necessarily appreciate how difficult it is. So I think the challenge is how do you sort of separate the mentality that it's the right thing to do, so therefore we should do it, and of course it needs to be able to sustain itself at a given point, versus we just need to get more on the bottom line as quickly as possible. And I think particularly at the moment with in the sector that we're operating in, there's lots of talk of new energies and cleaner energies and things like that, and all of those are going to be they're going to have profitability challenges, and anyone going into them is going to have to accept that for the 7 years that you're talking about, Helen, they're perhaps not going to make any money. But is it the right thing to do? And if it is, then we should work a way out of doing it.
Yeah, and I think to that point, there's also this angle about building capability provides options for the future,
Yeah.
because you can't know exactly how the energy transition will progress, at what speed, in what directions, and actually having built extra capability gives strategic options to the business in a way that doing nothing doesn't.
Yeah, and TapUp is a good example of that, because if you think of TapUp as a vehicle in a geographical area with a customer base in that geographical area, then at the moment TapUp is delivering liquid fuels to those customers in that geographical area. However, as the technology changes and as the market demands change, you can simply switch the product. I say simply, there's clearly some R&D needed, but the concept is, you just, instead of having a truck that's delivering liquid fuels, you might have a truck that's delivering hydrogen or electric charging or whatever the product is. But the difficult the thing that takes the time and impacts the profitability is the building of the customer base. So if you've already got that customer base and the vehicle, and then the needs of the customer change, then it's a product change as opposed to growing a new business. That is one of the key points of the vision for TapUp, is that yes, at the moment we're servicing internal combustion engines with as clean a fuel as we can. However, we know that that's not the future of the business. The future of the business is delivering alternative fuels, potentially through the same mechanism.
And I guess it's that shift from the customer coming to you going to the customer, and all of the things that you learn about how to acquire them and service them and support the customers could transfer.
Yeah, because that won't change. The the customer's likely to still need their vehicles refueling at the same time, at the same location. The mechanism probably won't change. The product will change.
I'm going to watch with interest. So one final question then. What's something that you had to learn the hard way that you wish someone had told you 3 years ago?
Yeah, it's a tough question. I think it's probably and it made it harder because we launched through COVID. So we served our first customer in April 2020, which was basically everyone was in lockdown. So the actual and it links into the point we said about starting new markets and developing that pipe. So we started the business with no customers, and we didn't really have much engagement with the internal stakeholders who have the customer base for fleet cards, for example. And the reason for that was because everyone was remote working. We were very operational. We were like, how do we get a vehicle in the right place with some fuel and find a customer? So I think if I was doing my time again, I think there needs to be a strong emphasis on getting the information about the new service out there way in advance of actually having the operational capability to do it, and getting that order book filled before your first wheels hit the road type thing. So I think for future, it's like who in the business, in the parent company, owns the existing customers who are likely to be interested in your new service, and let's get them on board and some commitment before you actually operationalize anything. And also the incentives for the people who need to be championing the service that you're launching. Are there any conflicts? If there are, how do you smooth those out before you get into it?
Yeah, because existing customer base is one of a big company's biggest assets, and being able to exploit that is not trivial when you're trying to do something new, right?
Yeah, and that's where I mean around the, so if a company is going to invest a significant amount of money in launching a new service or a new venture, then it makes sense to make sure that everyone in that company is incentivized and aware, or the other way around, aware of the new product, the new service, and incentivized to maximize it to its potential. Otherwise, you end up in a situation where you potentially spending a load of money and not seeing the benefit of it.
Brilliant. That was a really good one. So thank you very much, Tim. Thanks for joining us. And we look forward to watching Shell TapUp go from strength to strength.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for the time.
Thanks for listening to the Innovation Crowd. Subscribe on your favourite podcasting service so you don't miss a thing. And I'll see you next time.